Dear Argentines, I want to start by thanking everyone. Thank you for having given me the honor of being the president of this great nation, and thanks for having coped with, as they did, the hard months we had at the beginning of our management. I would like to thank especially the Argentines mistreated by the unfair model of the caste, those who do not live from the state, employees or those who have two jobs to hold a family, and all those who fight tirelessly every day. In a nutshell, I want to thank the Argentines on foot, who were treated as second citizens for decades, and those who today want to return the place they deserve. The sacrifice they have made is moving. I assure you that it will not be in vain. Once, President Menem said that the courage of a people is measured by the amount of truths that are willing to endure. When I assumed the presidency, exactly 1 year ago, I warned to get the country out of the misery in which the caste model sank us would require crossing an impasse of pain, even worse than the one that was already lived in Argentina. It was a real fire test. You corresponded to me, enduring that truth and accepting the bitter drink with your forehead high, despite everything you had already lost. There is a saying that good times create weak men create difficult times. Difficult times create strong men, and that it is strong men who create good times. This year, Argentines have proven to be strong men and women, forged in the heat of difficult times. We have shown that, when a town touches the background of the abyss, its urgency to undertake a deep and irreversible change becomes a true force of nature. Today, with pride and hope, I can tell you that we have overcome the fire test. We are leaving the desert. The recession ended and the country has finally begun to grow. Thanks for trusting this government. This does not mean that we have reached port, but it does mean that we can end the year with relief and that we have left the worst behind, and start the next year with the certainty that the future will be better and better. Happy times are coming in Argentina. But, for that reason, it is necessary for all to take dimension of what was achieved throughout this year, to guard and not assume what cost us so much. Exactly 1 year ago, the inflation rate was traveling at a rate of 17,000% annualized in the wholesale index. They had planted a hyperinflation that, given the social conditions in which Argentina was already, was going to leave a tendril of misery never seen before. Neither the Rodrigazo, nor the hyper of '89, nor 2001, nor said three crises together. Today, that same wholesale price index marked 1.2% for the month of October, and continues to fall. We are closer to inflation every day is little more than a bad memory. Exactly 1 year ago, we had 15 consolidated fiscal deficit points, of which 5 corresponded to the Treasury and 10 were below the carpet of the central bank. The deficit was the egg of the snake of all our ills, since without deficit there is no debt, nor emission, nor inflation. Today, we have achieved a sustained fiscal surplus, default-free, for the first time in the last 123 years. This was thanks to making the greatest adjustment in the history of humanity and applying a tourniquet to the monetary emission to zero. Exactly a year ago, a degenerate fiscal that I am not going to name came from printing 13 points of the GDP in a year to win in choice, without care of the inflation that was going to generate. Today the monetary issuance is a thing of the past. Exactly 1 year ago, the debt with importers amounted to the loud sum of $42.6 billion, which had left us to the edge of the collapse of the payment chain. Today, not only the debt is sanitized, but also the flow of imports, since they are paid in their entirety, in date. Exactly 1 year ago, we had more than 1 point of the GDP of commercial deficit and negative net reserves for $11,000 million. Today we have a commercial surplus, growing by leaps and bounds, thanks to which we could already buy more than $20,000 million, historical record of our nation, both to accumulate reservations and to face the different payments we had and continue to have ahead. In other words, we are paying the debt left by the serial defaulterators. Exactly 1 year ago, the exchange gap was 180%. Today, the exchange gap is practically dead and the free dollar is at the same value as a year ago. Something like that in our country had not happened for 16 years. This caused the average basic salary to grow from $300 to $1,100. Exactly 1 year ago, we had a country risk of 1,900 points, which came from being even higher, with national bonds quoting $35. Today, the country risk is below 700 points, and our bonds are already above $70. This is not an abstract value that only has to import economists. Lowering country risk allows us to lower interest rates, that is, improve the ability of all economy actors to access a cheaper loan, which facilitates investment and generates jobs. Exactly 1 year ago, the monetary rate was at 133%. Today, it is in 32%, lowering the general cost of credits. To understand the role of monetary policy, it is the preference of how much the state pays for receiving silver. If the state pays a lot, banks prefer to lend the state. If the state pays little, banks prefer to lend the private. That is, today, for the first time in a long time, banks prefer to work from banks. In accordance with this, a year ago the purchases in installments had disappeared. Today we not only have quotas, but we also have mortgage loans at 30 years, with more than 250,000 registered consultations to access one. Exactly 1 year ago, we had a completely handcuffed economy of regulations that complicated everyone's life and scared any type of investment. Today, we already eliminate more than 800 regulations, at the rate of more than 2 per day. Thus, we open the heavens, deregulate land transport, eliminate maximum prices and export prohibitions. We repeal the law of gondolas, eliminate the excesses of sedaic and collective management. Societies enable satellite internet and increase competition in the medication sector. If we consider the base law and the DNU as a whole, we have made the largest structural reform in history, 8 times larger than Menem's. Exactly 1 year ago, we had the disastrous rental law, which made the real estate offer fall and raise rental prices well above inflation. Today, rental contracts are free agreements between parties. The offer of real estate does not stop growing and the average rental price fell up to 30% in real terms. Exactly 1 year ago, we had the nefarious SIRA system, which was used by a group of kleptons to collect bribes in imports. Today, anyone who wishes to import something can do it, and every day we reduce tariffs for more goods, such as herbicides, urea, plastic supplies, tires, appliances, motorcycles, LED products and many more, lowering prices and benefiting our entire society through competition. A year ago, we were among the worst 35 countries in the world in the ranking of economic freedom. Today we are already in the upper half of the table and we will not stop until we become the freest country in the world. Therefore, our goal is to make 3,200 more structural reforms before finishing our mandate. Exactly 1 year ago, having the streets of our cities kidnapped by pickets was the norm. Imagine that in 2023 there were more than 8,000 pickets, an average of 32 pickets per business day throughout the country. Today, piqueteros are afraid to take the street, and people can circulate quietly, and rightly, because for us public order is sacred. This also happened because, a year ago, we had a system of forced representation through which the state forced the most vulnerable to depend on different poverty managers that forced them to attend pickets to collect their plan. Today, all social aid is directly assigned to the beneficiaries, without intermediaries. A year ago, the universal assignment card per child did not cover 60% of the basic basket. During this year they doubled in real terms, and today they already cover 100%. That is, we comply with our promise to take care of the most vulnerable during adjustment. A year ago, our forces of the order were despised by the political class. The street was nobody's land, the save who can prevailed. We closed the year with more than 250 homicides in Rosario, which was completely co-opted by drug trafficking. Now, he who does them pays them. We launched the flag plan and reduced the murders in Rosario by 63%. We are also putting prisoners throughout the country to work so that all the evil that has caused him is returned to society. We have undertaken the only possible way to end insecurity, one of the longest and most hard battles that Argentina has ahead. A year ago, it was customary for Argentine governments to be a global laughing, associated with the worst dictatorship and criminal regimes. This was a practice of decades, where, at best, we were an irrelevant country and, in the worst, we were used as the example, throughout the planet, of everything that should not be done or say. Today the world poses its eyes again on Argentina for the right reasons. Citizens and investors around the world evaluate the possibility of coming to live here, and in economic matters, a power like the United States is designing its own ministry of deregulation in the image and likeness of ours. A year ago they said we did not arrive in January. Today we are already in December. They said that because they needed not to be fast and not uncover their carece. But guess what? We are uncovering one by one, without taking them breath. And we are not going anywhere. They will ask if this we are doing works, if having an orthodox fiscal policy works, if being uncompromising with extortion and crime works, if anchoring the state to enlarge society works. Why did nobody do it before? What happens is that, most of the time, which is positive for society is harmful to politics and vice versa. That is the nature of the caste model. They need society to do badly so that they do well. We must understand why caste acts in this way. They don't mind thinking in the long term. His mind is not put in a nation project, but in squandering the future in favor of the immediate present. It is in your DNA. They do not think of anything other than exploit society in the society here and now for their own political revenue. When King Louis XV of France wastes the wealth of the kingdom in his personal pleasures, he used to say a phrase, "After us, the flood." In other words, the chance does not care about the future. May the coming generations fix them as they can. As the policy learned to burn the future of Argentines for their own benefit, much of society became accustomed to the same dynamic. Forced by the short term imposed from above, he did not see another exit to exchange his vote for increasingly immediate benefits. Monetary emission and indiscriminate state expansion are two expressions of this phenomenon. Both are based on producing an immediate feeling of benefit, while their negative effects only feel over time. Whole political careers have been built in that way, leaving as a balance more and more destroyed societies. With an increasingly large and more expensive state, those privileged by the omnipresent state, which were more and more, became interested and defenders that nothing changes. This explains that journalists, unions, social and political organizations of all colors, which until recently took their eyes, have joined in defense of the status quo as if they belonged to the same party. The state party. They want to live in their ivory tower, in their fictional paradise, erected on an increasingly impoverished society. They call their privileges acquired rights, almost as if they were a kind of nobility with divine right to live at the expense of society. Well, we came to disassemble that root system. We came to end the privilege regime that made the Argentines of good into second citizens. The time of the common man arrived. Therefore, we passed the chainsaw to public spending. We ended the advertising pattern of the media, which only in 2023 had promoted more than 100 billion pesos to current value. We reduced the ministries from 18 to 8, eliminated almost 100 secretariats and sub-secretariats, and closed more than 200 areas that had duplicate or obsolete functions. We freeze the salary of high-ranking officials from January to date. We closed Telem, which worked as a Kirchner propaganda agency, and only this year projected a loss of 20 billion pesos. We put 34,000 public employees and we are taking an adaptness exam to others. That is why we also eliminate hereditary charges in the state, which refer us to colonial times of noble privileges. We closed the Anadi and the Ministry of Women, which were endures of militants and were used to persecute political adversaries. We end with the privileges of the union caste in public companies such as airlines and Intercargo, and, although they continue to want to extort, we are not going to give the arm to twist. We are making many public employees who believed higher beings understand that they are public servants, who are there to provide a quality service to those who pay taxes. In addition, we eliminate more than 15 fiduciary funds that were caresse of politics. We eliminated the subsidies to INCAA, which went from a deficit of $2 million to a surplus of more than $4. We eliminate the work that was the single registry of automotive transport, saving Argentines more than 36 billion pesos per year. Through the SIGAN, we have audited the entire state, and we are auditing public universities, which also have to account for society, although they resist. All this is not an early song of Victoria, but a recognition that we have fulfilled the course that we draw and a ratification that our next objectives will also be a reality. Because exactly 1 year ago, there was great skepticism in the public debate and in the media about whether our government could succeed. In the best case, they said that we did not have the experience, the capacity, or the political power necessary to meet our objectives. In the worst case, that our government was not going to last for 3 months. And many sleeve of the caste tried to make this prediction come true by brute force. So much so, we managed to stabilize the economy and avoid the catastrophe we were heading. And with only 15% of the deputies and 10% of the senators, we made the largest structural reform in Argentine history. What I want to tell you with all this is that, if we could do so much with everyone against, imagine everything we can do with wind in favor. I could be twice from far away, twice as quickly. I could spend a whole year describing the things that changed in this last year, but I don't want to make them waste so much time, because something else that changed in these 12 months was to stop looking back to start looking forward. I want to take advantage of a few minutes in this balance of the year we are doing to tell you how this future is going to be starting, so that you can diagram your own destiny, that of your family, and always free. As we said that the activity was going to happen in the second quarter, that is, doing the homework is giving results. This trend will remain next year. We are entering a year of low inflation, high economic growth, and, consequently, a sustained growth of the purchasing power of Argentines, something that Argentines do not live decades. Why do I say that next year we will have sustained growth? I say it essentially for 2 reasons. In the first place, something that we are already seeing today, the economy has entered into a cyclical recovery that is taking us out of the well in which they left us. This cyclical recovery is based on 2 factors. On the one hand, the recomposition of real wages and retirements for the destruction of inflation. On the other hand, the recomposition of stocks of the companies, which will boost the economy after the liquidation of inventories during the first half of this year. But this is conjunctural. It is part of what we are seeing today that explains the brutal growth of the economy in the last quarter. But there is also the structural issue. The savings made during this year of 15 points of the GDP, which policy dilapidated, has been returned to the private sector, which will generate an increase in investment and also consumption. On the other hand, the decrease in country risk and, consequently, of the interest rate, lowers the cost of capital and, therefore, will produce a direct increase in investment. In addition, these 2 factors are added a third, which is the reduction of the total tax burden, either by the elimination of inflation tax and or by the reduction of explicit taxes that we are going to face next year. In fact, my team is finishing these days a structural tax reform that will reduce the amount of national taxes by 90% and will return to the provinces the tax autonomy that they should never have lost. Thus, next year we will see a true fiscal competition between the Argentine provinces to see who attracts more investments. The fourth central point of the growth process that we will see from next year has to do with the monetary issue. The convergence of the exchange rate parallel to the official exchange rate, which we are seeing these days and has never happened in the history of humanity, because the officer always converges where the parallel was and not vice versa. This brings us a little more to us every day to the definitive departure of the exchange rate, an aberration that should never have happened and that, with us, will end next year and forever. For this we are working on a definitive solution for the problem of the stocks of the central bank, which can occur either through a new program with the monetary fund and/or through an agreement with private investors. But, in addition to this, to advance in the process of closing the central bank that we have promised and that will end with inflation forever in Argentina, we have announced a currency competition scheme so that all Argentines can use the currency that they want in their daily transactions. They will be able to make the transactions in the currency that you want. Believe or not, we are doing it. This means that from now on each Argentine will be able to buy, sell an invoice in dollars or the currency in which they consider, except for the payment of taxes that for now will remain in pesos. All this means that this growth process will be sustainable over time. That is, we are abandoning that rise and low that it was our economy, in which one year we were well, the next one we fell, and so on, without really growing for decades and falling in terms per capita. This time, no, growth arrives to stay, just like the fiscal surplus. To accelerate recovery, it is also essential to break the chains of foreign trade that today suffocates us, to be able to export and import more goods and services of better quality and at a better price. Therefore, as I announced at the Mercosur summit, we are advancing in a proposal to eliminate tariff obstacles that hinder trade within the bloc, but we will also seek to reduce the common external tariff that increases life to all, without any benefit in consideration. Our ultimate goal in Mercosur is to increase the autonomy of the members of the organism for the rest of the world, so that each country can trade freely with whoever wants as it suits them. In that line, our first objective will be to promote a free trade agreement with the United States during the next year, the treaty that should have happened 19 years ago. Imagine what we would have grown in these almost 2 decades if we had marketed with the first world power. All that growth was taken from us with the simple signature of a group of bureaucrats denied to the benefits of free trade. In this way, Argentina will stop turning its back on the world and will be the protagonist of world trade again, because there is no prosperity without trade and there is no trade without freedom. In parallel to all this, thanks to Riggy, we will have the growth field full of new players that never existed in our country. Based on giving a logical fiscal framework to investments of more than $200 million, we already have requests for approval of investments for more than $11.8 billion, and there are advertisements for billions more in sectors such as infrastructure, mining, siderurgy, energy, automotive, technology, oil and gas. This works as an anticipation of what will be our future low-tax regime. The large investments of the regime will bring a commercial boom, because as they generate new direct employment, they demand goods and services of companies that already exist, generating thousands of indirect jobs and improving their productivity. These investments will function as an injection of steroids to our economy, putting ourselves in the place where we should be many years ago. In turn, the deregulation minister continues his marathon, going down the Argentine cost every day, becoming more competitive to every second, which will also result in an increase in productivity for all sectors of the economy, increasing everything I mentioned before. In terms of state reform this year, they already knew the chainsaw, but consisted mainly in reverse the excesses of the last Kirchnerist years. Now the deep chainsaw is coming, because what we have to retrace are geological layers of unjustified state agencies and functions. We have become accustomed to thinking about the national state as a babysitter who has to take care of everything, from feeding to entertain each citizen. But when a state arrogates tasks that do not compete, in addition to destroying the private sector, it ends up breaking its most basic obligations, such as ensuring public order or having a stable currency. We learned all this by bad in the last 20 years. I will say it from the front, it is always counterproductive that the national government is responsible for issues that either can resolve subnational states or make the private sector better through market mechanisms. Therefore, we are going to make an inclement audit to advance with the reduction of deeper public spending in the history of Argentina. This will lead us to a smaller, more effective and cheaper state for all taxpayers. We will continue to eliminate agencies, secretariats, sub-secretariats, public companies and all the state of the state that should not exist. Each attribution or task that does not correspond to what is supposed to have to do the national state will be eliminated. Because the smaller the state, the greatest freedom. In terms of security, we are not going to stop until our doctrine of the one who does them pays them is carved in the memory of each criminal. We are going to propose a reiterative law so that the repeat prisoners pay more expensive to make mistakes again. We are also going to promote an anti-mafia law in the image and likeness of the rich law, which liquidated organized crime in the United States 50 years ago. In turn, we will realize the decrease in the age of imputability, so that whoever is mature enough to commit a crime is also mature enough to suffer the consequences. On the other hand, we are going to reform the federal police to make it a federal criminal investigation agency, increasing its operational efficiency, its professionalization, its technology and its ability to combat both national and transnational crimes. Finally, we are going to promote an anti-cattle unit on the triple border in coordination with our neighbors that make up Mercosur. What represents human capital, the economic, social and cultural debacle of the last decades, has left a system where millions of boys begin their life unprotected and hungry, cross their childhood and adolescence without learning to read or write and never manage to insert themselves correctly into society. With the Ministry of Human Capital, we have the titanic challenge to rebuild social ties and provide tools to our future generations, at the service of which we will work with different literacy, training and strengthening of the role of families. As I say, the deregulatory crusade of this government has put us on the world map. In technological matters, this predicts a future of enormous opportunities, because the turn to freedom and technological optimism that Argentina is contrasts with many developed countries which are closer to being a regulatory hell every day. We have plenty of energy, cold and inhospitable lands, and quality human resource, also well. Not for nothing we are the country with more technological unicorns per capita in the region. These three combined factors form a perfect storm to attract high-degree investments in artificial intelligence. That nobody is surprised if Argentina becomes the next artificial intelligence hub in the world. In fact, it is no accident that the largest companies in the world are evaluating projects in Argentina. The interesting thing is that the increase in energy demand implies artificial intelligence will generate throughout the world a resurgence of nuclear energy after decades of decline, and we are not going to be left behind. We will design an Argentine nuclear plan that contemplates the construction of new reactors, as well as the investigation of emerging technologies of small or modular reactors, maintaining the highest safety and efficiency standards. This plan will be presented in the next few days by Dr. Rydell and will make us, once again, at the forefront of the matter. When the ideas of freedom prevailed in Argentina, we were spearhead of the region in technology. In 1900, Argentina was the country with the largest network of Latin America railroads and the 11th of the world. Today, paradoxically, just reuniting with the truths of our deep past, we can exploit our potential and jump into the future. In short, and to end, I hope that he can dimension how much Argentina has changed in just 1 year helps us to give fuel to our hope, thinking about next year. We still have a long path to go, but today, for the first time in decades, we have sitting the foundations for this path to lead to the prosperous and thriving country that our founding parents dreamed. Where there was anguish before, today stability and predictability prevail. Where we were abandoned to chaos and violence before, today the order prevails. Where we used to suffer from the state, today has prevailed again. Where the privileges of a few reigned before, today equality prevails before the law for all. Without those basic pillars that were absent for several years, there would be no possible way out for our country. Now, if one of the worst countries with economic results in the last 40 years, we become one of the best projected for the next 40 years. Throughout the world we are talking about Argentina, and there are even those who consider this whole process a true economic miracle, the Argentine miracle. I want to thank each of the members of my cabinet for the immense work they have done throughout the year. None of this would have been possible without you. In particular, I want to thank my sister, the General Secretary of the Presidency, for the enormous work she has carried out, not only during the campaign, but throughout this year. Without it, none of this would be possible. Argentina will have a huge debt of gratitude to her, but we can't sleep in our laurels. Next year is an electoral year. Unlike what politicians usually do, which in the electoral years are dedicated to waste the silver of all Argentines as if they were their own in search of votes, we are going to do something different. It is unique in the history of modern democracies that a government begins the electoral year without an expansive fiscal and monetary policy, because that is precisely the logic of the past that has sunk us. We are not going to fall into this temptation that seduced the caste, because we are the future in prosperity. We will continue our adjustment program to be able to lower taxes and return the money to the private sector, and we will put on the table an agenda of deep reform developed on the pillars that I told them today, so that society legally choose which country you want. A tax reform, a pension reform, a true labor reform, a reform of national security laws, a deep criminal reform, a political reform, and many other reforms that the country has been due for decades. For the first time in many years, next year's elections will not be people, but ideas. It will be a choice between the rancid politicians of the past or our agenda of the future. We are going to reflect the pillars on which we want to build this new Argentina, many of which we have defended as concepts throughout this year and with which many leaders committed themselves when they signed the May Pact. I hope that reflecting together on how much we have changed and how much more we have to do helps us to dimension how much there is at stake next year, because now, for the first time, Argentines have something to lose. Therefore, as Thomas Jefferson said, the price of freedom is its eternal vigilance. Along the same lines, I also want to extend a warning to the rest of the policy. They mistakenly believed that having chosen this government was a capricious outburst of society in a moment of deep discomfort. Well, society this year showed them that their commitment to change was not a momentary whim, but an unwavering conviction, covered by the hope of rebuilding our nation. Argentines will not tolerate foolish and malicious obstructions to our reforms, and it will be an important act of ingenuity not to learn from this year elapsed. They like it or not, Argentina left the well in which politicians sank us, and today, for the first time in decades, the sun of hope appears. The country is heading towards a future of prosperity that, for many of you, is unimaginable. But nothing and no one can snatch that hope from Argentines because, unlike other moments in our history where hope was based on mere empty words, we have brought results. They can be seen, they can be felt. That future of prosperity is available to our hands. There is nothing they can do to avoid it. They can get on the train of progress or can be overwhelmed by him. Without more, I want to thank all Argentines again for the enormous sacrifice they have made this year. Know that it has not been in vain and that all this year that has passed will be remembered as the first year of the new Argentina. I hope they spend a happy and family December and to plan big for next year. Have the peace of mind that this government will defend them by cape and sword and never lose faith in the future greatness of our republic. May God bless you every one of you, and that the forces of heaven accompany us. Thank you so much.